Hello everyone, my name is Daneshjoo.
Hi, my name is Dory.
Hello, my name is Ida.
Welcome to Sedaye Daneshjoo. Today we have Ida and Dory, and we're going to talk about failures. Failure is something that is rarely talked about. It's very rare that you would see someone like come on a show and talk about it, or talk about it in a published paper or an article. And it is something that is important. Like in a lot of people, like everyone, and at some point in their lives, will go through a failure. And We talk about success a lot. We promote it. We talk about our achievements. We give prizes for them, but we don't really address what builds and improves the skills of a person, or that person as a whole, which would be the failures that make you the person you are. And today, I wanted to ask you, can you share with us an example of a failure that you experienced that shaped how you approach work, school, or life in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really believe failure is what helps us be better and become successful. We learn from our mistakes. For me, it was my first shift as a medical scribe, and I was in Skid Row's #1 trauma center. For those who don't know at home, Skid Row is basically a population in downtown Los Angeles with a lot of homelessness, a lot of food insecurity, and a lot of substance abuse, a lot of, I would say, gangs and gunshots and stabs. It's a big trauma center, basically. And I remember being super scared to start my first shift there, but I really wanted to come in and see how the disparities are there compared to where I live in the valley, where we don't really have a lot of traumas, we don't have a lot of gang members and gunfights and things like that. So I really wanted to help kind of see that disparity and help try to make a change in that setting. And I was super excited, and then suddenly the paramedics call and they give us a name, Jane Doe, which is an anonymous name, meaning that the patient that they're bringing in their ambulance, they want to keep their identity a secret so gangs don't follow this patient into the hospital and finish the job. And I remember just feeling like there's a knot in my throat and being super scared, being like, oh no, this is going to be bad. We rush into one of the rooms in the ER, we open a room, make sure everything's set up, and they tell us this is a kid coming in with a gunshot wound to his brain. And I was like, this isn't going to be good. I could just remember. And this kid comes in about my age. He was wearing the same sneakers, Adidas sneakers that I was wearing. And I just remember looking at him when they're giving chest compressions, trying to save his life, even though it wasn't going to be successful, and the surgeons knew that. And I remember seeing brain matter spill from his head and just being so shocked. And then we called his time of death. And that's when I couldn't hold my composure anymore. I started crying, and I told the physician, I'm like, could I leave my shift early? I can't stay here anymore. And I was really upset at myself for not being able to hold my composure. I thought, wow, I'm not meant for this. I'm not meant for being a doctor. I can't even stand like helping a kid who's faced trauma. Like, I was so hurt, and seeing the sadness and humanity in that moment that I left my shift early. I went into my car and I started crying for hours and hours and hours. Basically what the rest of my shift would have been, I was just crying in my car, not being able to like drive. I didn't think it would be safe for me to drive home. And when I did stop crying and I drove home, I thought to myself, I'm such a failure. Like, I should have been able to stand up in that moment and helped out in the ER more, and actually be able to like learn from it in a way that, oh, maybe I should be able to help out more than I could have. Maybe I shouldn't just cry and like be in the corner and just be scared of everything. Like, why did I do that? And then I remember I took a break for maybe 2 weeks from my shifts. I was like, I just need some time. And during those days, I remember journaling. I remember thinking a lot, like, is this really what I want to go into? Like, I'm going to fail if I become a doctor. I don't want that. And then I kept thinking to myself, no, if anything, being in Skid Row is such a privilege where I get to see the disparities, and I get to see how physicians are the last hope for so many of these kids and so many of the population there. They're the last hope, the last line of safety, the last line of even having a place to sleep at night sometimes. And I want to be a part of that. I want to learn from how these physicians are doing it. I want to be a part of that team. So I pushed myself to go back after 2 weeks of not doing anything and just thinking to myself. And I was able to see more trauma. I was able to hold my composure in those trauma cases and actually be a part of the team. I was able to scribe. I was able to learn from the physicians how they address inequity in societies. And to me, failure was more a stepping stool to learn. It did hit me hard. I was really sad about it. I cried at home for hours and hours on end after my shift too. But I learned from it as well, so.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds like just such an overwhelming story. I think it would have been hard for anyone to keep their composure, especially if it's one of your first initial clinical visits, and what you said about just changing that. And I think that just shows how much compassion and empathy you have. Yeah. But wow, you know what? That made me think of, there's like two different types of failures. There's one where you don't reach a goal or accomplishment, and then there's one where you're just feeling like one. Even though you didn't do anything wrong, you were human, but just that feeling often is as intense as like not accomplishing a goal, and that's, wow. I'll talk about a failure of not reaching a goal. I do have experience of like feeling like a failure as well, and sometimes they go hand in hand together. Ever since I was like in high school, I wanted to go to UCLA. It was like my top school. My siblings went there, and I just saw my future there. And you know, I worked really hard for my grades and trying to get it together and make it happen. But when I applied and I transferred, I got my rejection letter, and that was really tough, because for years I had this vision that I was going to go there, this was going to happen. I had the grades for it, I had all A's, and I didn't expect that to happen because I had support from my family, my siblings who went there, they gave me guidance, but it ultimately didn't happen because I didn't double check my prereqs, which also, side note, if you're transferring to from a California community college to a UC school, there's a website called assist.org. It's a free website where you can check to see if your courses at that specific college meet the requirements for the specific major at one of the UC schools. So that's a side note on this conversation, but feel free to check that out. But I remember immediately my reaction was I started crying for multiple days. It wasn't just the one. I started crying and I didn't know what to do. I just didn't expect it. And I actually went through a period where I decided, oh, maybe I should just stay another year in community college and then apply again to make it happen. But on the other hand, I had these acceptances from these other schools that were great. But because I had that it was like a huge goal for me and I didn't reach it. And that I felt like a failure because I didn't, and my family, I had to tell my family, I had to tell my friends, and that's like a whole other aspect that's like difficult to share, right? Because I feel like, especially Persians, we're very high achieving, we work very hard to reach our goals, and I'm really proud of like our community for having that resilience and, always fighting to do more and do great things. And in that moment, I felt like I wasn't doing that, and I wasn't, I felt it was part of my identity was sort of distorted, also my own personal dreams. And just like, I think I had to sit with myself for a bit, sit in that emotion, sit in that feeling. Then I knew I had to pull myself out of it. I knew it wasn't going to go anywhere, it wasn't going to benefit me. And I had to think about my long-term goal, which was to go to med school. And undergrad was just one of those stepping stones into it. And it would have been great if it was at UCLA. But just realizing the overall goal that I had, and I can still reach that goal. That's like the bigger picture. And this just didn't work out. There was a lot of conversations I had with family and friends. It sort of goes into our previous session of uncertainty, but leaning on them for support, trying to take myself out, do something fun is really important, and talking to peers and mentors on what can I do, what do you recommend, and most of them in my case recommended that I just go ahead, transfer into a four-year institute, finish that degree, and head straight towards applying to med school and getting there, which in hindsight is like the right thing I think for my situation, but it was hard to hear that also. Sometimes like hearing advice like when you're in that initial heartbreak moment doesn't come off well, but looking back, I think they had my best interest, and it ended up working out. I'm in the middle of applying. I've heard back from schools, got acceptances, so it's going to work out in the end. I think just remembering that. But yeah, I think it was a difficult failure, definitely, for sure, a big one. But I ended up gaining so much more from that failure. As a result, when I went to San Diego, I had more research opportunities. I was able to get involved in, different programs, and I ended up learning about completely a whole county, which is totally new to me but beautiful, and I ended up falling in love with it, meeting great friends, great people. So sometimes, redirection needs to happen, and it's important, and you'll gain a lot of different experiences from it.
It's amazing. Yeah.
These are such powerful stories, and very emotionally charged ones for sure. I kind of, if I was to share a story of mine where I had this kind of experience, this goes back to when I was working as a research assistant in the lab, and I was doing basic science research, and there's a lot of experiments. You go to the lab every day, even on the weekends, and you keep doing experiments. The one that I'm specifically referring to is I was doing a lot of Western blots to basically look at certain proteins, and this was a very challenging protein to get on the Western blot, and I basically spent about 6 months going in every day, almost every day, and trying out different buffer conditions, trying out different protocols, and basically trying to take advice, trying to take feedback from other people in the lab, look up online resources, but it kept not working, and it's very frustrating when you're in that situation that you feel like a failure, because it sounds like such a small experiment and such a easy experiment to do. However, like everything in life, sometimes it just doesn't work. And after trying out all these buffer conditions, all these different protocols, getting advice, having someone even watch me do it to show them that I'm not doing it wrong, after that, we all in the lab realized, okay, this is kind of impossible to do. Let's move on and try another way. Try another way of looking at this protein instead of a Western blot, for example. And it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to get sad when you're faced with these kinds of challenges, when you fail. And I think what helped me, and I think what's important in battling in these situations, is that take these failures, these mistakes, these as you said, Dory, as learning opportunities, and also try to separate the failures from your identity, in the sense that these failures doesn't mean that you are not competitive enough, you are not competent enough. And they just mean that in that certain context, it didn't work out. Now you can go into the reasons why it didn't work out and try to solve those problems and improve your application, for example, improve your resilience at work, for example. It doesn't mean this is not personal. It's more about that small aspect of your life. It's not about you as a person. I think that was like the main goal and main conclusion that I had from my failures. And another question I had is we see a lot of students, like, it's very hard for them to talk about their mistakes, talk about their failures. We always want to talk about our achievements. We always want to go, oh, like I got this scholarship. I got to this program. Why do you think is it that people don't want to talk about their mistakes or failures?
Yeah, I think it goes back into what you said earlier, where a lot of times it's sometimes easy to connect that failure to your own identity and then make it measure your self-worth. And then in that sense, it feels really hard to share that news and share that information and talk about it. I think once you kind of make that disconnection and you realize that, well, this isn't measuring who I am as a person and what I can do and my potential and, and what the relationships I have with my friends, family, loved ones, and you realize that, and you have that growth mindset about the failure, that you can take this as a lesson and learn, and you can become even like stronger and more resilient. I think remembering those things makes it easier to share. I think initially for me, it's sort of feeling like I don't want to disappoint my family members and my loved ones who've been supporting me and been encouraging and amazing, but it's just sort of that anxiety and fear.
Yeah, completely. And I would think there's also, with your friends and your peers in your classes, there's always going to be like an internal bias that you want to fight. You don't want to come off as weak, or you don't want to come off as dumb or stupid. And although it's human to have failures, I don't know a single person who hasn't failed. You just don't want to really portray yourself as that in case they'll have that bias against you. And I think it's fair to not want to portray that. I don't think a lot of people do. But just know at the end of the day, you're not the only one who has failures. Other people for sure have had many failures. And actually, it was kind of funny because when I first found out we were talking about failures today, I was thinking like, I know I have failures, but like I can't recall any of them. Like, what did I fail in? And I was like, I don't know what to really participate and discuss about. And then I thought about it and I realized I redefined failure in my brain to be resilience. And I think that's what a lot of peers my age are doing nowadays, because we understand that failing isn't really failing. It's you're learning from it. You're actually building on it. You're gaining experience from something and you're going to make it better. So just the word failure, something that like puts you down, shouldn't be defining you. Change that to be resilient, to make yourself resilient, and your peers will know this was a stepping stool, a hurdle that this person came along, but they made it here. That alone is enough to make you not see yourself as a failure and not even want to talk about it as a failure. Like instead, it's an accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah, I really do echo that feeling. It does shape who we are, and it is some sort of feedback about how we did, but it's not really about who we are. If someone had failed something very important right now, what would be your advice to them?
Take your time to just think to yourself about it. Take your time to kind of go through the motions that come with it, but also after that, after the grief period or whatever time it takes to just be like, oh man, that really sucked. Take some time to be like, why did it suck? How could it have been different? What could I have done better? What could my setting have been to make it better? Because a lot of times it's not even you, it's your environment. And what am I going to do in the future so this doesn't happen again? What am I going to do in the future so this goes better the next time? So yeah, just don't tell yourself I'm a failure and just stay in the grief period for the rest of your life. You have so much more to learn. You will have so many more failures in your life and it'll go by.
Yeah, no, 100% I agree with that. I'm just gonna bounce off that completely. Just remembering that failure isn't your self-worth, and I said that before, I'll say it again. It doesn't measure your self-worth at all, just remembering that. And then also remembering that everyone goes through this, and being able to allow yourself to feel sad, but also take care of yourself. You know, try to be your number one supporter. If you really don't love yourself, then it's hard to, this got really deep, but it's hard to, you know, try to move past that and give yourself some grace, give yourself some love. And yeah, just try, you know, reach out to your family, friends, do some personal things. But yeah, I would say, like, that's my advice, yeah.
Those are very powerful stories and advice, and I thank you both, Dory and Ida, for being with us today. And I think we learned something new today as well. So reflect on your mistakes, separate it from your identity, and try to build from and improve yourself from there. Thank you very much. This was Sedaye Daneshjoo.